Look at this. No, I didn't. Hey there, everyone.
Hello.
Good evening. Getting ready for New Year's. I hope everybody is feeling strong. Getting ready to start off 2023 in a good way. Joyce, I see you there. And Elise is there.
Yes, I am.
And Mike is playing with the camera from in there. I too am playing with the camera. Two people playing with the camera at the same time. Here we go. We're getting everybody in.
Thank you.
Hello. Good to see you again, Joyce.
It's good to be back.
Good
Wish
to
I was
see you.
100%, but I'm about 90, almost there.
Oh yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, you'll excuse me if I don't stay for the whole
I
meeting.
know 150 to other people. That's right. Mary said 90% to you is like 100 for other people. I think 150.
Oh my God.
Crazy.
Thank you. But I am feeling better. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it. I'm glad to be back.
And we're waiting to see other people are stuck in traffic, they're stuck in airports, they're stuck in no, I was telling Joyce we have people all over the place right now who are not where they wanted to be or not where they should be. We knew it was going to be a tough travel time, but nobody expected this craziness. This is really, really bad. And I feel terrible for people who it affected their holidays and their holiday time with family. It's a
That
shame.
was hard.
It's a shame that people had to be away from their family and to be sitting in a airport in a airport terminal can be one of the worst situations for people, but
Not a vacation.
that's for sure. So yeah, I mean, the people who got to be at home, they got a good it's turned out to be a really good holiday. It got to be a really good holiday for them.
Did Harvey and Sharon get home yet?
They did not. So they said, Harvey said to me tonight, just before class, he said they just got home from Burbank where we were supposed to be home. We were supposed to be home Christmas Eve, but our flight was canceled, cannot be rebooked until today. And he said, we're on Alaska now and we'll see you next Wednesday night. So,
Right.
Yeah. And I understand Schulman's, you guys are at home, right? You're warm and in bed, or not in bed, but warm and in your house.
Yes, we are. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, yes, we are at home. And thank goodness we made it through another real cold spell. Even with dripping pipes, we ended up with a couple of frozen pipes. And
Wow.
fortunately, they came through on their own without incident. So we feel very fortunate.
Good. Yeah, that was another thing that we heard from people. Friends of mine in Chicago had their house was all shut down and messed up over Christmas. And yeah, they're Christian and they had Christmas and wanted to have Christmas and their pipes were frozen. That is not fun either. That's the one. And I told the guy, I said, well, at least you don't have earthquakes anymore, because he used to be from California. And he goes, yeah, but those happen, every 10, 15, 20 years. He says, this happens too much. So I guess there's times when people wish they could be in California, but
And there's times when people decide to move from Michigan to California.
I know this is the time. Right? This is the time when they get to watch the Rose Bowl.
Yes.
So we'll see. Hopefully everyone will be safe. So as I said before, there's people still coming and going, and I know some people are not going to be able to make it tonight, but we hope they stay safe.
Yeah.
And I wasn't there, but we had a wonderful screening of Fiddler on the Roof last week. Got some nice pictures of lighting the menorah with Kenny, and it looked like people had a great time.
Yes, we did have a great time.
I saw you're actually in the picture, Elise. And
Oh, really? I didn't break the camera?
well, I don't stop it. Here, I'm going to show you. They're prominently pictured. I sent these pictures on. They're there. See?
Wow.
Oh my.
You look quite serious. You look quite serious. I will say that. But yeah, there's a nice turnout.
This is the first I've seen that. It's hilarious.
Well, I just got the picture tonight from Kenny. I asked if anyone took pictures. So
Oh my.
yeah, it appeared. It's interesting. I know because I checked frequently that we sold out the tickets except for the first row, and there were empty seats, which means people just didn't come.
Yeah.
Or we're sick.
I'm 100%. I'm telling you. I wonder if I still have the screenshot. I have a screenshot of the tickets, and I mean anybody who went on last week will tell you that there were no seats available in this area, but for some reason, it means that people bought tickets and didn't show up. I mean, this whole
Or
area.
maybe they got sick.
Maybe, but I also think that what we're seeing now is people are making, they're making plans, and again, look, it's not the end of the world. It's a $14, $15 ticket, but I think there are people now who have no issue booking something and then just not going to it. And I've been hearing that with people who have plays and who have productions of things, seminars and things where they've sold or they've reserved seats for, and that people just aren't showing up anymore. And
Wow.
I think that was happening anyways, but I do think that COVID accelerated that. Sometimes people are genuinely sick. And then I think other people are like, you know what, I don't want to get sick. And then I think other people sometimes are just saying, you know what, I just don't feel like going. And if I don't go, everyone's going to assume I was sick and I have a good excuse anyways. So I think I'm seeing a lot more of people just making commitments and just saying, you know what, I don't want to go. And look, I mean, they paid for it. It's not like they didn't pay for it. It's not like they reserved it and then didn't show up and cost someone else a ticket, an ability to go. But I mean, who knows how many people didn't go because they had, there was a limited amount of seats and it reserved your seat and then somebody couldn't go. Or they didn't want to go because they didn't want to sit in the
That
front
was a
row.
lot of people too.
And didn't want to sit in the front row, right? So I am seeing this happen, and I talked to the person who puts on the LA Jewish Film Festival, and she said the same thing. She said to me a month ago, she said, we had a screening, we sold it out, and only half the people showed up.
Wow.
And this was completely independent of what just happened, because Kenny said to me, he said there were empty seats. He goes, there was quite a few empty seats. I said, Kenny, I don't know what to tell you. It was sold out. So, I don't know what the consequences of that will be. And if you're going to a stadium with 50,000, 60,000 people, no one's really going to care. But, if you're in a space where people have made reservations and they're limited and then half the people don't show up and there's only 50 people or 25 people,
Yeah.
that will have an effect. And I wonder what is happening for reservations, because restaurant reservations, because I know that a lot of places will take the reservations, and now a lot of places will charge you if you miss your reservation. But I'm wondering if people just don't care. I'm wondering if they'll say, well, whatever, I'll take the hit. And if I don't feel like going. So I wonder if that's happening with restaurants that require, reservations as well. But I do notice that a lot of the places, if you make a reservation at the restaurant, you have to give your credit card as a kind of to hold in case you don't show up. So I don't know. I don't know what it's going to mean for businesses that require seats and reservations and things like that. So I don't know. But definitely happened the other night, but I'm glad people went, and you had a good time, right, Elise? At the
Oh,
Fiddler?
it was great.
Excellent, excellent. Well, look, I wish I could have been there, and I even though I knew I wasn't going to be there, we had a family trip planned, but I was glad that we did it, and I wanted to make sure we did it, and we had to do it on that night. So when Greg Lemley said, "Hey, do you want to do it?" and I said, "Absolutely," I felt a little bit out of sync a little bit, because I don't like to not be there and know that it's happening. So I made sure they had the menorah, I made sure they had the stuff, and we had some giveaway prizes, and I wanted to make sure that all got there. So I delivered it over there myself last week after class, and I just, I made sure that it was ready to go. Anyways, I'm glad people got to enjoy it. The main thing was I wanted people to have an enjoyable night, and I'm glad you did. So,
And the lighting of the
Yes.
menorah was beautiful at the mall. It was absolutely beautiful. Thank you.
yeah,
Thank you for doing that.
it was nice. And Mike Schwartz, he got quoted.
Mike got quoted, and
Yeah.
Jason Gibbs remembered Lee Shulman.
He did. Do you remember that, guys? It was really nice.
It was very nice.
Yeah, that was cool. And I sent Joyce got to see it. Did you? And David and Cheryl, you got to see it too, right? You got to see
Good.
Lee recognized. Yeah, good.
Oh,
So,
you
yeah,
dreamed
and I had he didn't
Sure.
tell me ahead of time he was going to say that. It was just really nice that he did that. So a nice guy,
Yes.
nice guy. So it seems that way. I don't know him well, but he seemed pretty nice to me. So so last week we read the first, believe it or not, 5 chapters of Leviticus. And again, partly it's because it was about a lot of sacrifices and a lot of ways you're supposed to make sacrifices. Today, we also have a lot of sacrifices and a lot of ways you're supposed to make sacrifices. But after today, it's going to shift. Interestingly, you'd think maybe all of Leviticus was about sacrifices, but it's not really. It's actually not. It's really the first third of it, if you will, or the first quarter of it, I should say. And then it really does shift gears into more general laws and into other stuff. Mike says maybe we should skip this part, but if we did skip it, then people would say, well, maybe there was something you didn't want us to see. And I won't be accused of it. No, I'm not going to skip. So we are going to move through, but depending on how much we read, we might even get beyond just the sacrifices. But these next 3 chapters are that. But 4 chapters, but it was interesting. I was thinking about this. Joyce knows this, that Dennis Prager has done a commentary on the Bible called the Rational Bible, and he's done Genesis and Exodus. He actually did Exodus first. He did Genesis, and now he's come out with Deuteronomy. He has not done Leviticus. He also hasn't done Numbers, obviously, but he has skipped over Leviticus. And I wonder if he's done that intentionally. I haven't asked him, but the fact that he came out with the Deuteronomy one before he did, so I understand why he started with Exodus, but he wrote about why he chose Exodus to start with. And then he went back into Genesis. Okay. But then for the next one to be Deuteronomy means that he wanted to get something out, and he wanted to get his point out about Deuteronomy. I'm not saying he released these in his order of favorite books, but it is interesting that he should have. Summary of Exodus, Leviticus. Yeah, it is a summary. But in a way, you could make the argument that, again, it's the last book and it's the book that makes sense for it to be a summary, but he didn't do his summary on the summary yet. And well, he did. What am I saying? He came out with a summary, but
Right.
But if you did I don't know. I mean, there's clearly a reason why he skipped over Leviticus and Numbers. Numbers definitely has a lot more narrative in it, but I don't know. But there are people who say, when you start teaching Torah, you should start with Leviticus, which is interesting because you'd say, well, that's kind of the driest book. But the rabbis actually teach that when you start teaching Torah to kids, you actually start with Leviticus. And maybe it's because they want people to understand the law before they understand the stories behind the law. That's kind of the rationale that they give. And again, it's because the rabbis are concerned essentially with halakha. They're concerned with law. But let's take a look at chapter 6, where we left off. And the portion begins with the words with tzav, which means commandment, like the word mitzvah. So tzav means command, the verb command, which is the first word of the second line, because it begins, Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, and then it says, command Aaron and his sons thus. This is the ritual of the burnt offering. The burnt offering itself shall remain where it is burned upon the altar all night until morning, while the fire on the altar is kept going on it. That by itself tells us that the burnt offering, unlike some of the other offerings, is time consuming. It means that, again, you can imagine that it was done at the end of all the other offerings, that they would get up and then do the burnt offering, which is the again, in Hebrew, that we use the word olah, which means, like the word aliyah, to go up. It's the one that is goes up. What does the King James call the burnt offering? Burnt offering, yeah. It is translated differently, and sometimes in the more modern translations, it's kind of well, let me just look at some of the other translations for olah, because in other translations, again, it's called the the other offerings that we read about, the other offerings were partly eaten, partly, cut up for the priest to eat from, and then some of them were burned with other things and other items, and they, this one is completely torched. Mostly, again, we use the word burnt offering for it today, because, as I'm about to show you, one of the other words that they used to call it, we would never use anymore. Its traditional name in English is Holocaust. Now, today, when we use the word Holocaust, we only talk about one thing. The fact that this was the origin for the word that we use for the word Holocaust is interesting, because, again, it's almost like we forgot what the origin of the word is. It's the word that the reason that we called it the Holocaust was because the fact that so many Jews were burned. And so the word became so powerfully identified with the Shoah, when we call it the Holocaust, we call it the Shoah in Hebrew, that we either use the word Shoah or Holocaust. But the word Holocaust is a Greek word, and we almost now only say the word Holocaust when we talk about the capital H Holocaust. That's what the word actually means. I mean, if you look at the word Holocaust, is an animal. It's derived from the ancient Greek holocaustos, and you can see it. It means sacrifice, and get that ad out. And so this is this is what the word was. And now, no one would use that word today without meaning what they would talk about, which is this, the show.
Mhm.
So it's interesting that the word actually originally was connected to the burnt offering that was, and again, the Holocaust, a Holocaust offering was not a Hebrew, it was not only for Jews. The Greek word was there because Greeks also offered sacrifices, and they also offered sacrifices that were completely burned, that were consumed by fire. So I guess you could say what was interesting is other people offered sacrifices that were not burnt offerings at all, including the Greeks, where they would sacrifice an animal and just bleed it out, and not necessarily, they would use the blood for the sacrifice. They wouldn't even burn the animal. In Judaism, the sacrifices are always burnt. And so they're always burnt. It's just a question of whether they're completely burnt. So anyways, that's just a little lesson about burnt offering and the word Holocaust. So I didn't think that they used it in the King James because they didn't, for the most part, use just Greek words. They used English words. And even if they knew there was a Greek word for it, they didn't use it. They used English. It was almost like they intentionally used an English word rather than rely on the Greek. But in the Greek, it was, if you read a Greek translation, the Septuagint, going back to the Septuagint, the word would be Holocaustos. Anyways, I just want you to be aware of what the word burnt offering, how it figures in the Torah, and also how it figures in history. So back to the text. The priest shall dress in a linen raiment, the linen breeches next to his body, and he shall take up the ashes to which the fire has reduced the burnt offering on the altar and place them beside the altar. So again, we read about this before, the Michnah Sevad, the white linen breeches that they would wear. This is the undergarments that they would wear. He shall then take off his vestments and put on other vestments and carry the ashes outside the camp to a pure place. The fire on the altar shall be kept burning, not go out. Every morning the priest shall lay wood on it, lay out the burnt offering on it, and turn it into smoke, the fat parts of the offerings of well-being. So here again, not to be too confusing, but there again, we have other shlemim offerings that would also be burnt. They would, take out the ashes, bury, essentially take the ashes, and even the ashes weren't just thrown out. They were taken to a pure place, and then they would start the process again. A perpetual fire shall be kept burning on the altar, not to go out. So they never had to reheat it. They never had to turn the barbecue back on. It was always burning. Partly again, because they left those Holocaust offerings, the burnt offerings on, the olah, they left that on all the time. And this is the ritual of the meal offering. Again, this is the mincha offering. What's interesting is we call this mincha offering the afternoon offering, even though here it doesn't specifically say it's done in the afternoon, but it's clearly done after the morning offerings. This is the ritual of the meal offering. And we use the word mincha, by the way, to describe the afternoon service. So to this day, when we talk about the 3 times that Jews pray, it's evening, morning, and then mincha, the afternoon. And then the evening comes, the arvit, and it starts again. So arvit, evening, shacharit, the morning, dawn, and then the mincha, which essentially again took the place of the meal offering. A handful of choice flour and oil of the meal offering shall be taken from it, with all the frankincense that is on the meal offering, and this token portion shall be turned into smoke on the altar as a pleasing odor to Adonai. What is left of it shall be eaten by Aaron and his sons, and it shall be eaten as unleavened cakes in the sacred precinct. They shall eat it in the enclosure of the tent of meeting. So it seems again that this afternoon or in between offering, the mincha offering, is a grain offering, and it is an offering that they do eat from. And it seems like it's almost an offering that kind of cleanses or is the middle time of in the afternoon or evening for the priests to kind of then get ready for the evening cycle again. So it's kind of like an in-between, mid-time, middle time between the evening and then the morning time, which are the busy times. Though I guess you could say the middle of the night when the burnt offering was being offered was slow time, but that was kind of these were kind of the schedules, the daily schedules of the priests. So
And I'm aware now that Moses isn't included in any of this eating or dining of any of the
exactly, he doesn't get to eat it.
He doesn't get to eat anything.
And yes, and it's going to be even more specific. It shall not be baked with leaven. I have given it as their portion from my offerings by fire. It is most holy, like the sin offering and the guilt offerings. So all of these offerings that were the grain offerings are made without, they're made without leaven. That's again, chametz. There's no chametz. And here's the line that, again, to say what Joyce is specifically, it says only the male among Aaron's descendants may eat of it, as their due for all time throughout the ages from Adonai's offerings by fire. Anything that touches these shall become holy. So yeah, not only, again, does Moses not to get to eat of it, it says specifically only the males among Aaron's descendants will eat of it. Now, there are sacrifices that Aaron's family, including the daughters, can eat of, but at least the mincha offering is only supposed to be eaten by the priests and only by, again, the male descendants, the people who could essentially be priests, which I guess you could say includes men who are young boys who are not yet priests serving, but they could eat of it as they're learning or being part of the temple ritual. But it does seem like it's like the afternoon meal that will sustain them until the evening when things get busy again. Why? Well, probably because at nighttime, I'm speculating this, but it is more dramatic to see the fire burning in the evening when it's nighttime. And it's also obviously as the sun is dawning and it's, just the beginning of the day to see the fire. It's probably not that dramatic in the middle of the day to see a sacrifice. I'm just speculating. And again, I think it's based on the fact that, if you're having an offering that needs to burn for a long time, you better do it overnight. And so the ones that were done during the day are not ones that take up a lot of time, a lot of space. All right, so here's what it says. Adonai spoke to Moses saying, this is the offering that Aaron and his son shall offer to Adonai on the occasion of his anointment. 1/10 of the ephah of choice flour is a regular offering, half of it in the morning and half of it in the evening. It shall be prepared with oil on a griddle. You shall bring it well soaked and offer it as a meal offering of baked slices of pleasing odor to God. Now here we get into specifically the anointment of Aaron and his sons when they become priests. So now we're getting into a whole different thing, which is these sacrifices that are only being offered on this occasion, which is when this whole thing is starting, when these guys become priests. And so shall the priest, anointed from among his sons to succeed him, prepare it. It is Adonai's, a law for all time, to be turned entirely into smoke. And so this says it's not just this one time when Aaron becomes priest, but anytime a priest becomes the next high priest. When he becomes the Kohen Gadol, he goes through this. So this is a special ritual of sacrifices for when he becomes a priest. So to every meal offering of a priest shall be a whole offering. It shall not be eaten. Adonai spoke to Moses saying, speak to Aaron and his sons. This is the ritual of sin offering. The sin offering shall be slaughtered before Adonai at the spot where the burnt offering is slaughtered. It is most holy. Now, again, it seems like we were talking about the ordination, the beginning of the priestly time, the first priest, and then the first time any priest does stuff. And now we go back to the sin offering, right? So we step back into kind of the average ordinary sacrifices, but you'll see. The priest who offers it as a sin offering shall eat of it. It shall be eaten in the sacred precinct in the enclosure of the tent of meeting. Anything that touches it shall become holy. And if any of its blood is spattered upon a garment, you shall wash the bespattered part in the sacred precinct. So any of the blood that happens there is holy. Any of it, even if it has to come off, has to be done inside the sacred precinct. It means you don't take it home and wash it at home. The blood essentially is holy every piece of it is holy and has to be taken care of in the temple, this time in the Mishkan. An earthen vessel, in which it is boiled, shall be broken. If it was boiled in a copper vessel, the vessel shall be scoured and rinsed with water. So again, the holiness of this is also on the items that it comes in contact with. Only the males in a priestly line may eat of it. It is most holy. But no sin offering may be eaten, which any blood is brought into the tent of meeting. For expiation in the synagogue, in the sanctuary, any such shall be consumed in the fire. So again, this last part was all about the sin offerings. This is the guilt offering, which is the asham, which is different than the sin offering. Again, we talked about it last week. There's guilt offerings, sin offerings, offerings of well-being, or peace offering, the goodwill offering, the shlemim offering. And then, of course, as we are going to look at, the daily offerings that were offered 3 times a day. And of course, then the offerings that are done when you get a new priest. But here's the guilt offering, the asham. This is the asham offering. Again, very holy. It's most holy. The guilt offering shall be slaughtered at the spot where the burnt offering is slaughtered, and the blood shall be dashed on all sides of the altar. This is one of those offerings where you're dashing it on the sides of the altar. And its fat shall be offered, the broad tail, the fat that covers the entrails. All this we heard before. The 2 kidneys and the fat that is on them, and the loins and the protuberance on the liver, which shall be removed with the kidneys. The priest shall turn them into smoke on the altar as an offering by fire to Adonai. It is a guilt offering. And you'd think, hey, a sin, a guilt offering, the priests don't get to eat it. But no, you get to eat of it. The parts that you get to eat. Only the males in the priestly line may eat of it. It shall be eaten in the sacred precinct. It is most holy. But you don't take it home with you. You eat it there. Just like the blood, meat, none of it can leave. The guilt offering is like the sin offering. The same rule applies to both. It shall belong to the priest who makes expiation thereby. So too, the priest who offers another person's burnt offering shall keep the skin of the burnt offering that was offered. Now, this is an interesting little thing because it didn't really talk about this in the discussion of the sin offering, but according to this, the skin of the burnt offering could be kept. Because again, some of the offerings, like the olah, the whole thing is offered up on the fire. This one, it seems, is again with the skin offering, the offer for the guilt or the sin offerings. It seems like they get to keep it, and that was important and had value because the skins, of course, could be turned into hides and into leather, and had a value. So the priests actually get to keep the skins. Further, any meal offering that is baked in an oven and any that is prepared in a pan or a griddle shall belong to the priest who offers it. But every other meal offering with oil mixed in or dry shall go to the sons of Aaron, all alike. So again, there are some offerings that are split amongst the priest and the other priests, and some that only the priest who offers it gets to have. So needless to say, if you're not a working priest, there's definitely less chances for you to get food. If you're a working priest, if you're actually there, you get to have food. So their word eventually shifts of priests. It starts off with a family, but soon it's a whole tribe, a whole clan, a whole group of people, thousands of people. And it did make a difference because some sacrifices everyone was entitled to. All the priestly families were entitled to them, all the sons of Aaron, but some of them, it was only the person offering. So needless to say, if you get to actually work, you deserve it because you're actually doing the work. But it also means that the people who got to work the most got to have the most food, and they got to have the most value. They got to keep these things, right? So they remember, the priest who offers one other person's offering gets to keep the skin. So it doesn't say that every priest gets to have the skins. Only the person who offered the priest who offered it gets to keep the skin. So there's tremendous value in being the priest who got to work on the shift. And again, what shifts and what times people got to work was a major issue. As a matter of fact, it seems to be the major issue, at least during the times of the Maccabees, because by the time that the Hasmoneans become the priests, part of what happens there, and we don't talk about it at Hanukkah because it's not really the story and it's not the story that anyone wants to tell. But according to the Maccabee story and according to the rabbis to some extent, the people who were alive at the time, the Maccabees were not, the Hasmonean family were not the main family of priests. They were not in the main cycle of rotation. And it seems that at least part of what the Maccabees did was put themselves in the main rotation, and not only put themselves in the main rotation, put themselves as high priests. So the Maccabees were not one of the most powerful families at the time before they became the ones in charge, before Judah and Simon and the rest of them. But there also seems to have been a power struggle and a power grab for being in control. Now, look, they led the fight. They were victorious, and they died. I mean, the Maccabees died fighting for control of Jerusalem, but they also were a family that jumped up in power with that victory and became the priestly family, who were the main groups of priests, because there were other priestly families. The Hasmoneans were only one segment of those priests. There were many, many hundreds of families by that point that were priests. So yeah, it makes a big difference. If you're the ones who are offering the sacrifices, you do get to keep the money. Again, some of the money went to everybody. Finally, we read about the sin offering, the guilt offering, and here's the well-being, the shlemim. This is the ritual of the sacrifice of well-being that one may offer to Adonai. One who offers it for thanksgiving shall offer, together with the sacrifice of thanksgiving, unleavened cakes with oil mixed in, unleavened wafers spread with oil, and cakes of choice flour with oil mixed in, well soaked. The offering with cakes of leavened bread added shall be offered along with one's thanksgiving sacrifice of well-being. Out of this, a person shall offer one of each kind as a gift to Adonai. It shall go to the priest who dashes the blood of the offering of well-being. And the flesh of the thanksgiving offering, sacrifice of well-being, shall be eaten on the day that it is offered. None of it shall be set aside until morning. If, however, the sacrifice is offered as a votive or free will offering, it shall be eaten on the day that one offers the sacrifices, and what is left of it shall be eaten on the morrow. So there seems to be different kinds of shlemim offerings. One that is called a todah, a thanksgiving sacrifice, and one that is called actually two here. So there's really three: the neder or the nedavah, which is one's votive offering. It's probably what the King James calls it, a votive offering in 16. Voluntary. Okay, so yeah, I would even use the word free will is voluntary, but the nedava, but the word neder is literally a vow. It's a vow offering. So votive really means an offering of a vow, something that you promise to God. And the nedava is more of a offering that you gave out of free will just because you wanted to. But again, there seems to again be within the shlemim offerings different very well, you could say different intentions, where some people gave it as offering thanks for something that happened to them, whereas other people did it because it was promised, because they said they were going to do it. For example, they said, if God gives me something, then I'm going to give something to God. That's more of a neder. And nedava would be one, again, where people would say, look, I feel that, because I got this, that I need to give this to God, which is, again, maybe considered something like a Thanksgiving offering. But again, somebody felt voluntarily that was of their free will that they did it, but again, they felt compelled in some way to do it. But internally, not that they were forced to do it, not that they were ordered to do it, not that again, these were offerings of thanks and of saying, hey, this is a good thing that happened to me. Maybe they felt, they were healed, that they came about because they were rescued or freed from distress. So what is then left of the flesh of the sacrifice shall be consumed in fire on the third day. If any flesh of the sacrifice of well-being is eaten on the third day, it shall be not acceptable. It shall not count for the one who offered it. It is an offensive thing, and the person who eats of it shall bear the guilt. So definitely says that you have to follow the rules, and even again with this sacrifice of well-being that was given extra days to be consumed, it better be consumed in 1 or 2 days. It doesn't go into the third day. That was considered too much. Flesh that touches anything impure shall not be eaten. It shall be consumed in fire. As for other flesh, only the one who is pure may eat such flesh. But the person who in a state of impurity eats flesh from Adonai sacrifices of well-being, that person shall be cut off from his kin. That's a pretty severe law. When a person touches anything impure, be it human impurity or an impure animal or any impure creature, and eats flesh from Adonai sacrifices of well-being, that person shall be cut off from his kin. So you can see that this level of again, you're supposed to be pure, and if you're impure, this is pretty serious stuff. So this goes for, you know, for the people who are offering these sacrifices. They better be they better stay impure, you know, away from impurities. And if they're lying about it and it's found out, it's a serious issue. So this is the karet, the punishment for being cut off is not, it's not death. It's not like you're killed, but you are you're essentially you're expelled. You're excommunicated. So it's a serious issue. By the way, this part of touching impurity or being left into being put into a situation where you touch impurity. Look, making sure a priest, you know, essentially putting him in a situation where he's impure, basically it basically makes him unacceptable as a priest. So if you create a situation where the priest comes into contact, or you force him into contact with something, he can't offer the sacrifices because he's in a state of impurity. As we're going to see, that also goes for their body. And so we have a very famous situation where two of the Maccabee priests later on, the descendants of Simon, John and Judah, brothers, one of them cuts off the ear of the other so that he can't be a priest anymore. He didn't kill him. He could have killed him. I guess you can make the argument, but he took him out of eligibility of being a priest by cutting off his ear. So, you know, it's a bad way of rendering someone illegitimate as a priest. So Adonai spoke to Moses saying, speak to the Israelite people thus. And by the way, we happen to know about the Maccabee story. There might have been other stories that happened before that with other priests over the 1,000 years that there had been priests since Moses. By the time of the Maccabees, we'd already been priests for 1,000 years. I'm sure there are other versions and other stories about priests fighting with each other. But that's one that we actually have the documentation on. Anyways, Adonai spoke to Moses saying, speak to the Israelite people thus. You shall eat no fat of ox or sheep or goat. Fat from animals that died or were torn by beasts may be put to any use, but you must not eat it. So you're not allowed to eat from the fat of these animals. If anyone eats the fat of the animals, which offerings by fire may be made to Adonai, that person who eats of it shall be cut off from its kin. And you must not consume any blood, either of bird or of animal, in any of your settlements. So we know you're not supposed to eat blood. It's said that before, and now it's saying it again. You're also not allowed to eat the fat, especially, again, the ones that are supposed to be from things that are offered. It doesn't mean you're not allowed to eat fat at all. And that's kind of the difference between the fat and the blood. The fat is only an issue if it's fat that was supposed to be the offerings by fire. So you're allowed to eat fat of the animal, but you're not allowed to eat it if it was part of the fat that was supposed to be for the sacrifice. And here's specifically what it says about blood. Anyone who eats blood shall be cut off from kin. And again, this is the karet. This is the punishment of excommunication or being cut off. So, again, this isn't just, let's say, for sacrifices. This is just in general. You're not allowed to have blood in your food. You're not supposed to have it. You're not supposed to eat it by itself. You're not supposed to have it in your food, which is why we traditionally salt out the blood of animals and we eat it. And it says not just the cows and the goats and the rams and those kind of big animals, but the birds as well, which is why we salt the heck out of chicken and why chicken is always very salty when you have kosher chicken, because it has been drained of blood as well. And chicken is generally not as bloody as the meat, but the fact is that it says birds as well. So you got to get the blood out of the chicken too. Adonai spoke to Moses saying, speak to the Israelite people thus. The offering to Adonai from a sacrifice of well-being must be presented by the one who offers the sacrifice of well-being to Adonai. So the person has to do it. One own hands shall present Adonai's offerings by fire. The offerer shall present the fat with the breast to be elevated as an elevation offering before Adonai. The priest shall turn the fat into smoke on the altar, and the breast shall go to Aaron and his sons. So part of it is offered, and part of it goes away to be eaten by the priest, which seems like they're getting a lot of meat. And sure enough, and the right thigh from your sacrifices of well-being you shall present to the priest as a gift. He from among Aaron's sons who offers the blood and the fat of the offering of well-being shall get the right thigh as his portion. So this is, again, a tremendous amount of animal product the priests get to eat. For I have taken the breast of elevation offering and the thigh of the gift offering from the Israelites from their sacrifices of well-being and given them to Aaron and the priests and to his sons as their due from the Israelites for all time. So again, they get to be fed by the people for forever. So again, it's not just God that gets this food or gets these animals. It's really the priests that are being sustained by this. Those shall be the prerequisites of Aaron and the prerequisites of his sons from Adonai's offerings by fire. Once they've been inducted to serve Adonai as priests, these Adonai commanded to be given them once they've been anointed as a due offering from the Israelites for all time throughout the ages. Such are the rituals of the burnt offering, the meal offering, the sin offering, the guilt offering, the offering of ordination, and the sacrifice of well-being. So again, these are the things we read about: the olah, the burnt offering, the mincha, the chatat, the sin offering, the asham, the guilt offering, and again for this offering of ordination when they become ordained, and for the offering of well-being, the shleimim. So again, the offering of ordination we're going to get to again in a second. We're going to get into that in particular for the rest of class. But again, these offerings are kind of now been summed up. I will tell you again, these words, we still use the word chet, chatat, for guilt when we talk about, or sin, when we talk about Yom Kippur, we talk about chet, al chet shehatanu lefanecha, for the sin that we've sinned before you. This is the word we use. We oftentimes also say the transgression or missing the mark is the word we also use for chet, which is because the word chet is used for archery and for using a bow and arrow. It's when you don't hit the target, it's called a chet. Asham definitely has a connotation of guilt, of embarrassment, of a feeling like you have done wrong, which is another level or a different level or a different feeling from feeling like you've transgressed. A feeling of embarrassment or a feeling of guilt is something a little different. We talked about the fact mincha is the afternoon, but this is another interesting word, miluim, which is the word for ordination. We don't actually call it the word miluim in Hebrew. We have a different word for ordination. When we ordain a rabbi or cantor, we give them the word is smicha. It's to place hands on someone. So it's more of a laying on of hands, which is ordination for ritual or religious reasons today. Interestingly, the word meluim, which is the word for ordination, what does the King James have for ordination? Consecration. Okay. In Hebrew, the word miluim we actually use for when someone gets called up into military service. So when a person becomes a soldier in Israel, that's called miluim. We actually call it, even when they're called up for reserve duty, it's miluim. It's your service, which is interesting because again, they knew what they were doing when they called it that in Hebrew, connecting the military service to, as they did here, your priestly service. There's a sense here that again, this is making you, putting you into a special category of service. So again, this is the word we use here for military service in Israel. The miluim is the military service that people get called up for. So interesting decision. And again, This is the way God charged Moses at Mount Sinai when commanding that the Israelites present their offerings to Adonai in the wilderness of Sinai. So that's definitely a summary of what we've read so far. And so here we get into chapter 8. Now, what we're talking about here is now getting ready for the ordination, for the first time that these guys are going to do their job. So let's take a look at these next couple chapters, which are the chapters that set up how they're going to do their job. Adonai spoke to Moses saying, which is again the same way that it began, the other chapter began. It's it's a good way to kind of introduce the next set of rules, the next set of laws. And so while we had before the word tzav, command, now we have kach, take. Take Aaron along with his sons and the vestments and the anointing oil, the bowl of sin offering, 2 rams and the basket of unleavened bread, and assemble the community leadership at the entrance of the tent of meeting. Moses did as Adonai commanded him. And when the leadership was assembled at the tent of meeting, and again, the community leadership, it says the kahal, the community, Moses said to the leadership, this is what Adonai has commanded to be done. So Moses gets together the people in the community, he gets together the leaders of the community for this special moment. And it says, and Moses brought Aaron and his sons forward and washed them with water. He put the tunic on him, girded him with the sash, clothed him with the robe, and put the ephod on him, girding him with the decorated band with which he tied it to him. This is Moses doing this for his brother. So Moses is the one who commands it, but notice what he also does. He actually does the work of preparing them for the priesthood. He dresses him, right? He gets them ready in this special clothing that they use for the priesthood. But he washes him first. He washed him. And this is the tradition that we have to this day, that the Levites are meant to wash. One of their jobs is to wash the Kohanim before they do their rituals. And this ritual of washing the Kohanim is still done in some traditional congregations where the people who are Levites will wash the Kohanim before they offer the priestly blessing at the high holidays. This is still done to some extent by some groups, by some people in the community, that we still remember who are the Levites and who are the Kohanim, and we go through this ritual. Now, some people find it uncomfortable to do this. Some people think it's a little, caste-like to have these people doing it. Now, again, the rest of the people who are not Levites or Kohanim are sitting there watching it and going, this is weird maybe, or this is amazing, or this is tradition. But it seems like the person you don't want to be is a Levite, because the Kohanim are getting washed and the rest of the people are sitting there not doing anything. But it's clear that the level of what the Kohanim are, it's elevated, it's special, but the Levites get to do something special here. And there's no question that at the time when Levites were doing these kinds of things, that they were seen as special, that they were integral to the system. So that the descendants of, yes, so took a Kohen in the bathroom and washed him. Let me ask you a question. Did it seem weird to do that?
Oh, very weird.
So Mike took a guy in the bathroom and washed his hands. In some communities, that would already be considered really weird.
It was
But-
weird, but he was an older guy, so it wasn't as.
Yeah, no, I understand. But it is a very interesting kind of ritual of how we've kept those traditions going.
Mike, that was the only Levite at
Could have been a lot, but look, look, there's a recognition that when you're doing this, that as a descendant of Moses, you're doing something that connects you to Moses.
Spiritual doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yes. So it would seem like an honor for it.
My dad about it, very proud.
Yeah.
And Rabbi, what about the ritual with the Pope washing the feet?
Yeah. So Pope
Do that.
washed the food. Mike said he's not interested in that. Look, there's communities where that would have happened, where the Kohanim would have their feet and their hands washed. There was a time when that would have been done in a community where people aren't wearing shoes. But yeah, the Pope does it. It's considered an act of in accordance, kind of living like Jesus. So there's a ritual that ties us to the history. But yeah, absolutely. This is interesting, kind of keeping alive rituals that go back thousands of years. But look, some people would say, yeah, but the priests aren't putting on special garments or anything like that now, but they are going to bless the people. And the idea is we're keeping alive some of this, even though the temple was destroyed, even though we don't have a priesthood, even though they don't have sacrifice, even though we don't have the ephod, even though we don't have these things, we have this, and it keeps that ritual alive. So look, I don't know. I've never had to do it. I'm not a Levite, so it's not something that ever came to me. Mike's gonna ready to wash my hands. Thank you. I will pass on that, but I will tell you, thank you. But I think
I'm an expert at it.
he's a Levite. But it was an honor. It was definitely supposed to be an honor. And again, this is Moses that's essentially, passing on to some extent. And again, David's comparison to the Pope, Moses was the holiest, right? He was the only one who was really talking to God. So the fact that the priests are now going to have Moses do this for him is essentially saying, you guys are ready to do this. And of course, this is all part of the ritual of them taking on this job.
Bring up all the Kohens.
Yeah, to do the blessing.
Yeah.
So some synagogues, as Mike's saying, they'll have the Kohanim offer the blessing, the priestly benediction. Did she have men and women Kohanim do it? Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, I was going to say. So there's definitely there are people who've tried to keep this alive. Look, I have an interesting take on the priestly blessing. Anyways, it's a really special blessing. But I think what's cool about it, and obviously I do it at Shabbat, but I do think that there's a certain understanding that nowadays, or actually not nowadays, for the last 2,000 years nowadays, that people have an ability to bless each other, and there is no need for a priest to do it anymore. So, or a rabbi to do it for that matter.
I disagree with that.
Yeah. You think, yeah, but I
won't say it on Friday night.
yeah, I know. But people, but the point of saying it is to essentially ask for God's blessing on the people anyway. So it's not, the priest doesn't do it. It says, may God bless you. It doesn't say I bless you.
I think that should be a priest or a rabbi.
Who does it? I don't know.
That's my opinion.
So when Moses does this, he also puts the breastpiece on him, the shulchan, the choshen, sorry, the priestly breastplate, and he also puts on him the Urim and Tumim, right? So the Urim and Tumim were held on that, or they were kept in there somehow, either in a pocket or somehow. But it says that they were put into the breastpiece, and he set the headdress, and he set the headdress on his head, and again, this is the turban. And in the front, he put the gold frontlet, which is like a crown that says the holy diadem. It says, Kodesh Adonai, holy to God, as Adonai had commanded him. And then it says, Moses took the anointing oil and he anointed the tabernacle and all that was in it, thus consecrating this holy oil that he had. He sprinkled some of it on the altar 7 times, anointing the altar, all its utensils, and the laver with its stands to consecrate them. He poured some of the anointing oil upon Aaron's head and anointed him to consecrate him. So this is, again, putting some of it on him. And it says again, the shemen, the oil, is part of this anointing, which is the word, again, Hamshicha, which means to anoint, which is the word for Moshiach, right? The anointed one. It literally means somebody who's had anointing oil put on them. That is what the word for, again, now people say, well, the Moshiach is a savior, is the anointed one. By God is only one person. It again appears that because the priests are anointed, they're also anointed people. I don't know, again, whether that would have the same feeling or connotation of what it means to be anointing, but that's what it says. Their oil's put on their head. Moses then brought Aaron's sons forward and clothed them in their tunics, girded them with sashes, and wound the turbans upon them, as Adonai had commanded Moses. He led forward the bull of sin offering, and Aaron and his sons laid their hands upon the head of the bull of sin offering, and it was slaughtered. So the first offering that's made is the sin offering. But of course, this sin offering is specific, because watch what happens. It was slaughtered, and Moses took the blood with his finger, put some of it on the horns of the altar, purifying the altar. So again, it was anointed with oil, and then there's blood put on it. Then he poured out the blood at the base of the altar. Thus he consecrated it in order to make expiation on it. And Moses took all the fat that was about the entrails and the protuberance of the liver, and the 2 kidneys and their fat, and turned them into smoke on the altar. The rest of the bull, its hide, its flesh, and its dung, he put on the fire outside the camp, as Adonai had commanded Moses. Now, this is the bull that is done on behalf of the priest, so that he can do the rest of the job. This is done one time. But again, then there's the ram burnt offering. Again, these are offerings that were offered all the time, but this is the first time that they're being offered. And you can see that according to this, this first time, none of the animal is being eaten. It doesn't say any of the animal is being eaten, because it says the rest of the bull, its hide, its flesh, its dung, put into the fire outside the camp. Then there's the ram for burnt offering. Aaron and his sons laid their hands upon the ram's head. It was slaughtered. Moses dashed the blood against all the sides of the altar. The ram was cut up into sections. Moses turned the head, the sections, and the suet into the smoke on the altar. Moses washed the entrails and the legs with water and turned all of the ram into smoke. That was a burnt offering for pleasing odor, an offering by fire to Adonai, as Adonai had commanded Moses. So again, this next animal also completely burned up. Again, this is the first time it's being offered by the priests. So it's not like part of it is eaten. This is all burned up. He brought the second ram, the ram of ordination. Again, this is the word meluim. Aaron and his sons laid their hands upon the ram's head, and it was slaughtered. And Moses took some of its blood and put it on the right ridge of Aaron's right ear, and on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot. And then Moses brought forward the sons of Aaron and put some of the blood on the ridges of their right ears, and on the thumbs of their right hands, and on the big toes of their right feet. And the rest of the blood Moses dashed on the sides of the altar. So this ram is sacrificed, this ayil is sacrificed, and because it's specifically for ordination as opposed to the sin of the priests, this one is actually done in order to make them ready to be priests. And so this is put on the extremities of their bodies, the extremities of their head, the extremities of their hands, the middle part of their body, and the extremities of their toes. So every part of their bodies, the ends of those pieces of those limbs of their bodies is covered as they get oil, they get blood on those, and then they are able to essentially be pure. So the blood is put on the sides of the altar. It's also put on the sides of their body and the ends of their body, as if to say again, the pieces closest to God in your body are going to be pure. They're going to be purified. He took the fat, the broad tail, and all the fat about the entrails, the protuberance of the liver and the liver and the 2 kidneys and their fat, and the right thigh. And from the basket of unleavened bread that was before Adonai, he took one of the cake of unleavened bread, 1 cake, and 1 cake of oil bread, and 1 wafer, and placed them on the fat parts on the right thigh. He placed these on the palms of Aaron, on the palms of his son, and elevated them as an elevation offering before Adonai. And Moses took from their hands and turned them into smoke on the altar with the burnt offering. This was an ordination offering for a pleasing odor. It was an offering by fire to Adonai. And again, the whole thing is burnt up. And this ordination offering, again, is different. It's not burned like the sin offerings, the bull and the ram before it. This ram is some of the blood is used on Aaron and sons. It's also offered up with these matzot, with these unleavened wafers. but it also is all burnt up. Moses took the breast and elevated it as an elevation offering before Adonai. It was Moses' portion of the ram of ordination, as Adonai had commanded Moses. And so it says, and Moses took some of the anointing oil and some of the blood that was on the altar and sprinkled it upon Aaron and his vestments, and also upon his sons and their vestments. Thus he consecrated Aaron and his vestments, and also his sons and their vestments. And so it says that part of the offering was for Moses. And so some of it is actually for Moses himself. And Moses said to Aaron, boil at the flesh at the entrance of the tent of meeting and eat it there with the bread that is in the basket of ordination as I commanded. Aaron and his sons eat it. And here it says that some of it, this part that was Moses's was eaten and it was not burned up. So part of the ordination offering is not burnt up. So they ate some of it at the entrance, and whatever is left over of the flesh of the bread, flesh and the bread, you shall consume in the fire. You shall not go outside the entrance of the tent of meeting for 7 days until that your period of ordination is completed. For ordination will require 7 days. So this ordination offering went on for a week, which means they could not be with their families. They could not go back to the community for 7 days. Everything done today, Adonai is commanded to be done 7 days to make expiation for you. Now that, after doing this big ritual, they're being told, and you're going to do this same thing for 7 more days, every day. You'll eat of this offering, this one offering, the ordination offering, but all the other offerings are going to burn up, and you're going to do this like this for 7 days, and you can't go outside of the tent of meeting. You can't go outside the tabernacle for 7 days. This is your ordination period. This is the period that you're going to go through this preparation for you to be priests. You shall remain at the entrance of the tent of meeting day and night for 7 days, keeping Adonai's charge, that you may not die. For so I have been commanded. And Aaron and his sons did all the things that Adonai had commanded through Moses. So this is pretty serious. This ordination period is a daily ritual for a week. And this is to prepare them for the work ahead and for the generations ahead where people are going to be part of these rituals. And so now we're getting to chapter 9. As I said, the ordination ritual has been laid out. We've heard how they're supposed to sacrifice daily. We've heard how they're supposed to sacrifice for the special occasion of the ordination over the last couple of chapters. That's primarily what Sav is about, that second Torah portion of Leviticus. Now, this is the third portion. So again, we moved very fast. This is chapter 9. So we read chapter 1 through 5, when we read 6, 7, and 8. And now as we get into chapter 9, something big happens. And this is where we're about to leave sacrifices, to the extent that you're going to have a lot of detail about sacrifices. They're not gone completely. It's not the last time we're going to hear about a sacrifice necessarily, but now you're going to get a little bit of story. And when I say a little bit of story, in the entire book of Leviticus, we have very little story, very little narrative, but we're about to get into it right now. And what's amazing about this story, well, you'll see what's amazing about this story. So this story is at the beginning of the portion. It's called Shmini, which means on the 8th day. And here we say, Vayehi b'yom hashmini. On the 8th day, Moses called Aaron and his sons and the elders of Israel. And he said to Aaron, take a calf of the herd for a sin offering and a ram for a burnt offering without blemish, and bring them before Adonai. So what it seems as though the 7-day period of ordination is over, and now it's time to get into the daily time of business. Now the priesthood is ready. They've been purified for 7 days. And for that week, now they've been made ready. Now it's time to get to business. You're going to start doing the sin offerings and the burnt offerings, and you're going to get to work. This is pretty wild. And speak to the Israelites, saying, take a he-goat for a sin offering, a calf and a lamb, a yearling without blemish for a burnt offering, and an ox and a ram for an offering of well-being to sacrifice before Adonai, and a meal offering with oil mixed in. For today Adonai will appear to you. And they brought to the tent of meeting the things that Moses had commanded. And the community leadership came forward and stood before Adonai. And Moses said, this is what Adonai has commanded that you do, that the presence of Adonai may appear to you. And Moses said to Aaron, come forward to the altar and sacrifice your sin offering and your burnt offering, making expiation for yourself and for the people. And sacrifice the people's offering and make expiation for them, as Adonai had commanded. And Aaron came forward to the altar and slaughtered his calf of sin offering. And Aaron's sins brought the blood to him, and he dipped his finger in the blood and put it on the horns of the altar, and he poured out the rest of the blood at the base of an altar. This seems like a pretty straightforward sin offering. The fat and the kidneys and the protuberance of the liver and the sin offering he turned into smoke on the altar, as Adonai had commanded Moses. And the flesh and the skin were consumed in fire outside the camp. And then he slaughtered the burnt offering, and Aaron's sons passed the blood to him, and he dashed it against the sides of the altar, and they passed the burnt offering to him in sections, as well as the head, and he turned it into smoke on the altar. He washed the entrails and the legs and turned them on the smoke on the altar with the burnt offering. Next, he brought forward the people's offering. He took the goat for the people's sin offering and slaughtered it and presented it as a sin offering like the previous. He brought forward the burnt offering and sacrificed it according to regulation. And then he brought forward the meal offering and taking, this is again the mincha, that kind of the afternoon offering. Taking a handful of it, he turned it into smoke on the altar in addition to the burnt offering of the morning. He slaughtered the ox and the ram and the people's sacrifice of well-being, the shlamim. Aaron's sons passed the blood to him, and he dashed it against the side of the altar. Fat parts of the ox and the ram and the broad tail, the covering, fat and the kidneys and the protuberances of the livers. They laid the fat parts over the breasts, and Aaron turned the fat parts in the smoke of the altar, all going right as planned. And he elevated the breasts and the right thighs as an elevation offering before Adonai, as Moses had commanded. And Aaron lifted his hands towards the people, and he blessed them. And he stepped down after offering the sin offering, the burnt offering, and the offering of well-being. And Moses and Aaron went inside the tent of meeting, and when they came out, they blessed the people. And the presence of Adonai appeared to all the people. So the kavod Adonai, the holy essence of God, is in front of the whole people. Everything seems to have gone according to plan. Everything that they did as they were commanded. The people are blessed. The presence of Adonai is there. Everyone's feeling great. The opening of the temple, the opening of the Mishkan, the first sacrifices, going perfectly. Fire came forth before Adonai and consumed the burnt offering and the fat parts on the altar. And all the people saw it and shouted, and they fell on their faces. And that moment, when the fire comes forward from God and burns the altar, then they know, oh, God really likes this. Because not only do the priests do their jobs, but God is now showing his presence, showing God's presence and making the altar on fire. And they were so happy because they felt like God was with them and everything is great. Everything has gone according to plan. Well, as you can tell, I'm setting you up for chapter 10. And Mike is laughing because he knows what's about to happen. Because chapter 10 is our story, or the dramatic part of the story. And that's the story, for those who remember. Aaron's sons, Nadav and Abihu, each took a fire pan and put fire in it, and they laid incense on it, and they offered before Adonai an alien fire, which in Hebrew is an Eish Zara. What does the King James call it? Strange fire, which had not been enjoyed upon them. And the fire came forth from Adonai and consumed them, and thus they died at the instance of the Lord. Now that is all the Torah, well, says another paragraph or two, but it doesn't say anything else about how they died other than the fire consumed them from God. Just like the fire, Melifnei Adonai, is the same way as it described the fire before, that a fire came forth from God, milifnei Adonai, same words, fire from God, and they died. And then again, before God. And Moses said to Aaron, this is what Adonai meant by saying, those near to me, I shall show myself holy and gain glory before all the people. And Aaron was silent. And Moses called Mishael and Elzaphan, sons of Uzziel, the uncle of Aaron, and said to them, come forward and carry your kinsmen away from the front of the sanctuary to a place outside the camp. So these people that get called out to do this are part of Moses and Aaron's family. They're cousins, right? If they're sons of Uzziel, the uncle of Aaron, they're also sons of Uzziel, the uncle of Moses, right? So they're Mishael and Elzaphan are their cousins. So they're Levites. And they come forward and they carry out their kinsmen. So these are Levites doing kind of helping the priests. And they came forward and carried them out of the camp by their tunics as Moses had ordered. And Moses said to Aaron and to his sons Eleazar and Ithamar, the two left over, do not bare your heads and do not rend your clothes, lest you die in anger, strike the whole community. But your kin, all the house of Israel, shall bewail the burning that Adonai has wrought. And do not go outside the entrance of the tent of meeting, lest you die, for Adonai's anointing oil is upon you. And they did as Moses had bidden. That is the last word of the story. Now, I'm just going to show you because we're going to get to the rest of it in a second. But let's look at these 7 verses, because this is the way chapter 10 begins. And arguably, again, this is the only narrative in the entire book of Leviticus. Everything else is a law. Everything else is a statement of what you're supposed to do forever. The only story that seems to take place, and again, there's a lesson here, because it says, again, it says right here, this is what I meant when I told you, right? Through those near to me, I shall show them. So there's a lesson here. But this story takes place in a moment in time. The rest of the book of Leviticus essentially is set up as laws for all time. This is an incident that happens. It's a narrative. It's a story. And this is pretty much it in the entire book of Leviticus. Nothing else happens in Leviticus where we pointed and said, well, that only happened that one time. This story is that story. That narrative. One other story. But this is it. So it's a pretty tough story. And a lot of people, when they read this story, they're upset by it, they're puzzled by it, they're I don't know, they wrestle with it. They wonder what really happened.
What did Rabbi say what an alien fire was?
What do they say it was?
Yeah.
Well, there's discussion about it, right? There's a lot of debate over what this Eish Zarah was. Was this simply was this a fire that they made that they just kind of improvised? They just said, well, let's try this. Or was it something that they did where they were trying to do some kind of witchcraft or some kind of magic? They were trying to harness God's power in a way that they really were doing something dark. You get differences of opinion from the more benign part, which is that they were just doing something they shouldn't do, and they were taught a lesson, kind of made an example of, which is why Moses says, you got a big responsibility, Aaron. This is why you can't mess up. And there is this understanding that, again, maybe they were doing something wrong and they were doing something, we'll get to it in a second, why they did this wrong thing. But again, maybe it was motivated by a sense of entitlement or doing something that was really evil, it was based on an evil intent, or again, either because they were trying to harness God's powers, or because they were arrogant and haughty and were trying to do stuff that they wanted to do, not what they were supposed to do. So there's different takes on what they did, but it's clearly the rabbis were intrigued by it. I think every Jewish person, or any person of any faith who reads this, kind of takes away a different feeling from it. And again, over time, I've had different feelings about what happens here. Look, there's some people who feel that this is Aaron's punishment for the golden calf, which is kind of unfair because why do his sons have to pay the price for his failure at the golden calf to do the right thing? And now they're punished harshly. But the argument is he didn't get punished harshly. He didn't even get punished at all at the golden calf incident. And so now there's a disproportionate punishment. Now he really got it.
Well, his punishment was he didn't get into the holy.
Well, he didn't get into the Holy Land either. That's true, but
That's my.
that could be the same issue that he had with Moses, which is in listen and follow directions. But look, if he really did something bad at the golden calf, if he's really being punished, here's the argument. The argument is there's no worse punishment than to lose your kids. So if God was going to punish him by burning him up at the golden calf,
Killing the kid.
I only will tell you that's the logic behind it. I didn't say it's right. I didn't say it's fair. I don't think it's fair. So, but the argument is if God's really going to punish him, he punishes him this way, which again, I don't like that understanding, but the people who feel when they've read the story of the golden calf, who feel Moses, why did Aaron get away with it? Why doesn't God punish him for hoping in this act of defiance against Moses, against God, right? Then why doesn't he get punished? And here he does. For people who are looking for that, and again, that's what the Midrash does, right? It looks for, those gaps and try to fill them with understanding. This is what some people would say. And again, we don't like it because we don't like the idea that the sons get punished for the sins of their father. Now, the argument further would be, but they're doing the same thing that their father does, which is they don't follow directions, and they did something wrong. Could they have been spared being burnt up? Well, their punishment is disproportionate. And that would be, again, the argument is the priests have an enormous responsibility, and when they mess up, the punishment is going to be really severe too, because they get all this great attention, they get all this special treatment, they get all this food, and with it comes a tremendous amount of responsibility, which now is seen through the punishment that happens to them. So that's the argument. I will say it's not the way I've read the story over time. I would say the people essentially are taught a lesson that maybe if they're punished disproportionately, it's because they're priests and they're going to be the next priests, and they've shown themselves to be not worthy of being priests because they don't do what they're supposed to do.
Could have really happened.
Yeah.
These guys were making a fire.
And it burned them up. And
And then the writers had to write the reason why that happened.
so that they deserved it. Could be, but there's definitely a situation here where Aaron is basically told to be quiet. And it says Aaron was silent. It doesn't say that he had to be silent, but there is this idea that, again, when they carry them out, that Moses says, you don't,
The story could have been embellished too.
of course, but it says that you can't mourn them the way you would normally do it. When it says don't tear your clothes, right? It's basically saying the people will mourn them, but you don't mourn them. And this doesn't seem to be a normal situation of mourning somebody who would have done something accidental, or they just got burnt up, that they were punished. And so Aaron has to suck it up and basically be told, you
Well, see, I
don't
think
do
all
that.
that part was made up later on
Maybe,
when they wrote this.
but the understanding here to some extent,
They had to have a storyline, a meaning behind it.
correct. But the takeaway from this,
Everything happens
for a reason.
So
And
they're
but the,
saying that, their sons got burned up for a reason.
yeah, but the takeaway from this will go like this. There are modern ramifications to this. So what happens today, for example, and to use kind of a weird comparison, but it happens. When somebody is raised in a traditional community, let's say today, let's use kind of a Chaim Potok type story of the chosen, or one of these stories. If you have a rabbi whose son, let's say, use a modern thing, left the community and was no longer living an Orthodox lifestyle and got killed in a way that would be, got overdosed on drugs or just got killed in a whatever, exactly. He got killed in a way. The father, to some extent, can't mourn the way a parent would normally mourn, because there's a sense of punishment for that, and that he has to suck it up and can't show his emotion, because the son's suffering, to some extent, they deserved it. And this is where there's a modern connection here, which is that people, if that's the lesson, then they brought this disaster on themselves, and that's tough. Tough to take.
Stretching it now, but in the last jazz singer movie with Neil
Yes.
Diamond, when Neil Diamond left.
When Neil Diamond left, for those who can't hear Mike, he's talking about the jazz singer. Yes.
And, and what's his,
Yes. Laurence Olivier plays his father in one of the weirdest castings of Jew. When I talk about Jew-faced actors, Laurence Olivier playing it. He should be.
Oh, he was so good now.
Well, he's definitely was a great actor, but having him play a Jewish guy was a stretch. It's not as bad as Anthony Hopkins suppostenly was in Armageddon Time. Okay, well, maybe by that point, but yes, he was.
His clothes.
He did. He tore his clothes. So the character tears his clothes for his son, who left the community.
Right.
Yeah. So people did have a sense of, that person was gone. Well, Tevye does it in Fiddler on the Roof.
Yeah.
When Hodel leaves to marry the Gentile, he tears his clothes.
Does he tear his clothes?
Yeah.
I mean, I just watched him a couple weeks ago.
Hodel? Which is the one that marries the Gentile guy? I think it's Hodel.
Yeah.
Is it Hodel or Hava? Hodel. So when he, is it Hava? I don't know. One of them. So not Seidel. She's the oldest. Anyways, but people did that. They did do it. They said that their child was dead. So in this case, it says don't rend your clothes, because you're not allowed to show sense of mourning for this child who was punished. So the story of Nadav and Avihu is a tough one. Again, connections to Aaron's sins.
We don't read that anywhere else in any of the books of the Bible at all, right?
Of someone getting burnt up.
This story.
No, there's no other versions of this. No, but there is the story of the guy who touches the ark as it's falling off and he gets killed.
Right.
He dies suddenly, heart attack, whatever. He dies when he touches the ark, and all he's trying to do is stop the ark from falling. So there's an understanding that when you're dealing with these holy objects and this holy space, you better be careful, because it's not a game. It's nothing to mess around with. So there is an understanding. That story again is the story from Samuel when they're bringing in the ark into Jerusalem. So there is a frightening power to this that is awesome. It's astounding. It's miraculous, but it's also dangerous, and it's scary. It would be scary to be in the presence of this. So you can understand why the priest would have been scared and take this very seriously. So there's this understanding that these guys died to kind of teach a lesson to everyone else not to mess around. Now we're gonna. I guess it kind of begs the question: whenever a priest made a mistake, is he looking up, going, "I hope God didn't see that one," or, what does God punish every time one of them made a mistake? So it is very scary.
First mistake.
Yes, but there's definitely a sense of we got to be very careful from now on. But of course, now that we're going to get to it in a second. Oh my gosh, we just spent all this time consecrating everything and making everything holy, dashing blood on everything and pouring oil on everything and washing everything and getting everyone ready. And now it's all gone. So as I tell people, it's like opening day of the restaurant, the place catches fire and burns down. That's not a good opening day. This was opening day because they had a week of ordination. The 8th day is opening day. Everyone's ready. The soft opening is over. The priests are now open for business. Because the first week is just for them. Now they're open for business, and it's a disaster. So what are they going to do now? So we're going to read that. We're going to come back to that. We're going to get to that of the Achrei Mot portion deals with the sacrifices that were essentially made to cleanse and expiate for this sin, which of course becomes the rituals for Yom Kippur. So we will come back to it, but we're not there yet. So you have to be there in a couple of weeks as we read through this and get to Achrei Mot. So we do get back to it, but if we don't get to it right away, interestingly, we're going to kind of go off in a tangent to other stuff. But this is really serious that this happened on opening day. And the rabbis actually point out, look at this poor family, right? They were so excited with the fact that they're priests. You know, think about Aaron, think about Aaron's wife. And the rabbis say in the Midrash, think about Aaron's wife, who was so excited for her husband, who's now the first priest, and she's excited for her sons that are going to be priests one day. And here she loses two of her sons on that day. So her immense joy and pride is turned into horrible sadness on the same day. So it's a terrible feeling of going from the highest that you could feel to that. And you can think about when it's happened over history, where occasionally you'll have something and you'll be like, oh my gosh, how lucky, how fortunate the person is. And then almost immediately it turns to disaster. And I think, I think people kind of felt that way when the Challenger space shuttle exploded, because it was such a terrible disaster that this was a space shuttle mission that was taking Krista McAuliffe, the first teacher, into space, an average ordinary person, that was going to go into space, and the pride that the people took in her family and her school and her going up. And it just went up in a minute, that pride and that joy and the exceptional feeling of like how lucky was turned into that to disaster. And then when Ilan Ramon, yeah, exactly. And now that happened at the end, at the reentry. So it was already the joy of Columbia going up. And I was there, as I've told people, I was there at the Columbia launch, and it was an amazing moment, and feeling joy that the first Israelis going up into space. And I remember as the people were watching it live as the space shuttle was reentering, and they showed people in Israel watching the reentry, and then watching this tragedy as people's joy was turned to sorrow. And again, that was a strange one, because it was about 10 days, about 2 weeks later. So there was a little bit of time lapse from from a week, from the joy turning to sorrow. But we were definitely still people were so excited, and then you go from the heights of excitement and joy into just horror. So it happens sometimes. I mean, I can think of the times that it's happened where it just must be so shocking. I mean, again, to use a horrible equivalent, which God forbid should never happen, but it would literally be like a president being assassinated at the inauguration, having a president become president and watching everybody celebrate the new president and having that person be killed right as they're becoming president. This is an ordination. I mean, this is an inauguration. So it must have been just horrible for people and shocking for people. So this is what it says. And again, it's not a lot of verses. The range of how guilty they were and how evil their intent was is all there in over the years in the commentaries about it. And again, you can kind of take away your own understanding of it. And we're gonna as we finish up this chapter, kind of take away your own issue, your own thoughts about this. I did point out, we were talking about on the Tuesday class, we were talking about names in Judaism and how they've changed over time. And, it was interesting because for centuries, you never had Israelis named Nadav and Avihu. Avihu's still not very commonly, I don't hear that a lot, but I do hear the name Nadav a lot more common in Israel today, Nadav. And it's a nice word. It's connected to the Nadavah that we heard before, the free will, free will offering, the Nadav. it's a nice name, but it became a name associated with this son, this priest of Aaron that did this bad thing, and it wasn't a common name, but it's kind of come back. Eleazar has been a common name for a long time. Itamar, even an uncle whose Hebrew name was Itamar. Itamar was not uncommon. It's become even more common, I think, in Israel today, both Eleazar and Itamar. Itamar wasn't super common throughout Jewish history. Eleazar was definitely much more common. One of the Maccabees, one of the brothers was Eleazar. So
English name would be for Itamar.
no, it's just, I mean, my uncle Ed was in Itamar, but yeah, there's not a, it's interesting. It's not, it wasn't a very common, English name either,
Eleazar would be probably Steele
Eliezer, right? Eliezer
or Eli.
or Elia, yeah. So means God is my help. Itamar means like with a tamar, with the date palm. So that's the story. But then it says, Adonai spoke to Aaron saying, drink no wine or other intoxicant, you or your sons, when you enter the tent of meeting, that you may not die. This is a law for all time throughout the ages, for you must just be able to distinguish between the sacred and profane, between the pure and the impure, and you must teach the Israelites all the laws which Adonai has imparted to them through Moses. Which is why there are people who say that is what Nadav and Avihu were guilty of. What caused them to do this was they were drunk. So if they were drunk, their judgment was impeded and they did it. It doesn't say that they were. But the fact that the next line says that you're not supposed to drink any wine or intoxicant is God's way of saying, don't let this happen again. So it doesn't say it, but the juxtaposition in the Torah allows for an understanding that this is the reason. This is why Nadav and Avihu did what they did. We don't know it for sure. Again, it doesn't say it. It doesn't say that they were drunk, but the juxtaposition leads some people to say that is what Nadav and Avihu did. But what's interesting is now we're getting into laws. And again, this one for the priests is pretty important, which is not to drink wine or any kinds of alcohol.
Remember that.
Shecher. I told you, I never drink wine before services, ever.
During services.
Only during the times you're supposed to drink. And actually, that's serious because I won't even drink wine. I don't drink wine at Shabbos. If I'm having dinner before, I will never drink wine before Shabbos. And again, even like you could say, even a cup of wine, well, it's probably a cup of wine or even 2 ounces or 4 ounces, whatever, of wine isn't going to intoxicate me. But I do take it seriously that you're not supposed to. And I don't take, and I would, for that same reason, I wouldn't take any, it says, or any other intoxicant. I wouldn't take any kind of medication that would render me, unable to do it. And listen, there are people who take, certain kinds of drugs for, because of anxiety or because of, they're tired, they need a boost or whatever. I don't know. I think that if you're going to take something that's going to change your state of mind, I mean, again, the equivalent today would be people who would take, that would, smoke pot or take a gummy or whatever. I mean, now there's 50 million ways of ingesting THC. Look, there are people who could say, hey, look, I've never asked rabbinic colleagues whether they do that, but I'm sure there are some who do. And I'm sure that, that they don't see this as a problem. They're not a priest. They're not doing that, whatever their answer is. But to me, as if it impedes their ability to do their job in any way, or is going to change the way that they're going to do their job, I would say that the lesson from this is you don't do it. And I believe that. I mean, look, the rabbis are the ones who said, hey, we're not priests, but we don't drink or use intoxicants before we render judgments. So they said, look, because we do these things today, because we teach the Israelites the laws which God imparted, that they don't drink. And it's the same reason why I wouldn't drink or do anything before a class, before a time like this. I would never come into a class and teach with alcohol. What?
Way back when we had Wednesday nights,
We did? During class? I don't ever remember it.
Well, except when we.
Yeah, but I don't remember drinking during class. No, Mary, did we ever drink during class? Oh, there's Mike Carlin. Did we ever drink during class?
Yeah.
I don't remember drinking during class.
Never
Maybe
that
after-
I noticed or never that I knew. No,
But during class?
Yeah.
no.
Mike, I don't ever remember that, but
I don't
whatever.
either.
I mean, I will tell you, I don't ever remember drinking during a class. And maybe afterwards, but, and look, we have a lot of events where, I mean, we had Hanukkah, we had vodka and latke at our house, but there was no teaching and that was the purpose of doing it, was to have fun and to have a celebration. But yeah, I would never, I don't, again, any time where what I would say would be impacted by what we'd be consuming, I would never do it. Because again, that's, we understand that there's a time for having fun and there's a time, for enjoying, with friends and whatever, but there's also a time where you're doing stuff that's holy and that's important. And we understand that that's not the time to do it. And again, I think most people would understand that. I think most traditions would also say that it's not good for a priest or for a minister to come in intoxicated to do services, because again, it impairs their judgment. It maybe has them say something that they shouldn't say. Look, I say things all the time that I shouldn't say, let alone I should be drunk when I say those things. I'd impair judgment when I'd say it, I'd be even worse. Mormons do, yeah, Mormons and other people who follow the Bible to certain extents will say that, yeah, that a separation for it is necessary at all times. And because Mormons essentially teach that there are priests, that the men in the church are priests, that they do believe that there's always a time for them to necessarily be that way. Look, the Torah definitely says that this is the time when you don't drink is when you enter the tent of meeting. There clearly is in a certain time and a place. It doesn't say never drink alcohol. So it doesn't say that. It says that when you're entering the tent of meeting, when you're distinguishing between the sacred and profane, that's when you don't drink alcohol. So there is a time and a place for it, and it wouldn't say, it would say if it was supposed to be at all time you weren't supposed to drink. It does not say that. Look, by the time the LDS Church came into existence in the 1800s, people had other beverages besides alcohol, right? We had juices and we had non-fermented drinks. And we also, by the way, by that time had better sanitary water supplies. For most of history, people had to drink wine because that was the only ways that they could have drinks. Again, it was maybe the wine was maybe not as strong as it is today, but here it says you can't drink any wine when you're in the temple. So essentially, you couldn't have any kind of mood altering substance, including wine, even if it was weak wine. They couldn't have it. Look, it says that Jesus drank wine. Now, well, the implication is again that wine was an important part of meals in those days. It was just standard. But again, by the time of Mormonism, it was much easier to get other kinds of drinks. But I will tell you that there was another reason why the Mormons were so against alcohol in their original days in the 1800s. And that was because the entire temperance movement that existed in the United States was a political and essentially kind of like a social issue, which was very, very important. And the temperance movements in America were connected to abolition. They were connected to women's voting rights. The temperance movements were political forces and also, again, in some cases spilled over into religion. So for new religious movements that grew in the 1840s and 1850s, like Mormonism, during the Great Awakening, they were impacted by the temperance movements. Look, according to the historical sources, alcoholism was so prevalent amongst Americans in the 1800s that there needed to be a movement towards getting people into a healthier state when it came to alcohol, because it was just so prevalent that alcoholism was rampant in America during that period. And so there was a feeling like there needed to be a religious response to it. So there was also a big part of it, was that Mormonism was part of those movements that were temperance movements. And again, it was temperance movement was connected to abolition of slavery. It was connected to women's rights. These movements were very powerful. So I think that you have to take that in consideration to the social movements of Mormonism that Mormonism grew up in. But again, there are places where alcohol is not tolerated in Judaism, but it's really in this one situation. There is no other time in the Torah where it says do not drink. The only place is here, which again is one of the reasons why the rabbis say it was specifically repeated or given here, because Nadav and Avihu in particular were responsible for it. So it's almost like God now needs to say, and don't let that happen again by not drinking. Don't be like Nadav and Avihu. Doesn't say that specifically, but again, the closeness, the juxtaposition leads us to that conclusion. It has led us to that conclusion. Again, not everybody, but that is a rabbinic teaching on it. And then it says, Moses spoke to Aaron and his two remaining sons, Eleazar and Ithamar. Take the meal offering that is left over from Adonai's offering by fire and eat it unleavened beside the altar, for it is most holy. You shall eat it in the sacred precinct inasmuch as it is your due, and that of your sons from Adonai's offerings by fire, for so I've commanded. So that again is the mincha offering, the meal offering. But the breast of the elevation offering and the thigh of the gift offering, you and your wife, and here it says right here, the women now, and your sons and daughters with you, they may eat in any pure place, for they have been assigned as due to you and your sons from the Israelites' sacrifices of well-being. Together with the fat offering, they must present the thigh of gift offering and the breast of elevation offering, which are to be elevated as an elevation before Adonai, and which are your due, and that of your sons for all times, as Adonai has commanded. So it says right here, your sons and their daughters with you. So there are sacrifices here. It says right here, this is an offering that the families can eat, men and women. And again, that meant that they were not offered inside they were not eaten inside the temple or inside the Mishkan, because the women were not allowed in there, but they were as a place where they could eat it, they could enjoy it, and they were allowed to eat some of the offerings. They had to. They were supported by these offerings, the women. Together with the fat of the fire offering, they must present the thigh or gift offering and the breast of elevation offering, which are to be elevated as an elevation offering before Adonai, and which are your due, and that of your sons with you for all time, as Adonai has commanded. And Moses inquired about the goat of sin offering, and it had already been burned. He was angry with Eleazar and Ithamar, Aaron's remaining sons, and said, why did you not eat of the sin offering in the sacred area? For it is most holy, and it is given to you to remove the guilt of the community and to make expiation before Adonai. And so Moses was worried and upset that the offering was not done properly. Since its blood was not brought inside the sanctuary, you should certainly have eaten it in the sanctuary, as I commanded. And Aaron spoke to Moses and said, see, this day they brought their sin offering and their burnt offering before Adonai, and such things have befallen me. Had I eaten sin offering today, would Adonai have approved? And so Aaron's answer is, today, after this horrible situation, was I not supposed to do what I did? And it says Moses heard this, he approved. And so Moses is kind of calms down after Aaron explains to him why they did what they did. And so it seems like Moses is worried that Aaron and his sons have screwed up. Aaron says, no, I think this is what was supposed to have been done. And Moses agrees. Moses calms down. And so this is an interesting case of Moses kind of learning from his brother, and God does not intervene here. God doesn't say which way it was supposed to have gone, but we assume that the fact that Moses listens to Aaron and approves that everything is okay. Now, chapter 11 moves into something completely different. And we're going to actually end here today because we got through the sacrifices. Now, Mike, you can calm down because the sacrifices are over. We got through and we even read chapter 10, the story of Nadav and Avihu and what happens there, the narrative. We get back into the laws now. That scene is over. Though we, as I said, we do get into Achrei Mot, into what happens to clean up. But now, next week, friends, we are going to read chapter 11, the laws of kosher animals. And you get to eat, or you get to read what you get to eat of the animals. And so we're going to get into that next week. And you can see, well, it's not just birds. It's not just animals. It's also what kind of crickets you can eat, because there are crickets you can eat, but you're not supposed to eat most crickets. So we're going to get to that. We're going to get to the crickets that you can eat. So you can see it's a pretty long chapter, at least the way it's organized in the translation. And again, the way the Christians kind of put it together, it's all part of our portion, Shmini. But you can see this is all one chapter. Chapter 11 is about the animals. Chapter 12, we then get into Tazria and Metzora, which are the laws of skin disease and impure and pure situations for our bodies, not just for the priest, right? Because the priest's job is to assess the medical conditions for these people, for our people, for every person. It's one of the things that they have to do, and why they have to be sober, because they have to make medical assessments here. So Tazria and Metzora go on from chapter 12. So chapter 11, the end of Shmini, is the laws of kashrut. And then you can see Tazria and Metzora are chapter 12, 13, 14, and so we go into 15.
16 is my
15, and then we get to Achrei Mot.
yeah, that's me. That's my
So Achrei Mot picks up after what do we do with them dying? And so,
I forgot about that.
so we actually skip over
50 years.
the chapters of Tazria and Metzora. We're not going to skip over, we're going to read them. But when we get back to when we get to Achrei Mot, we come back to the scene and how do we clean up. So it is there. We will read it in a few weeks. We are not in person next week. We're online next week to read Tazria and Metzora. You guys are going to be in Santa Monica. We're going to wish Mike a successful surgery and recovery to health. It is a perfect time for us to read that portion because it is about skin diseases. Think about that. Oh my gosh. Who would have known, Mike? So there you go. The assessment. Huh? Not a it's not a coincidence, right? The timing is interesting. So we're going to read about that next week, Tazria and Metzora. But as I said, we are going to read about food too. We're going to go back to chapter 11 next week, and we're going to read about what type of animals we can eat. I had a whole discussion about this today, which is we have wonderful meat substitutes that we can have. And as we talked about last week, I think we discussed it Tuesday, actually. Yesterday. Was that yesterday?
No,
Last week, we talked about whether animals that are grown in a laboratory, would they be able to be eaten if they weren't kosher animals? So they, the FDA just approved lab grown meats.
no, they have.
Really?
Yeah,
They have not.
yeah.
I missed that.
So the question is, will those animals be kosher? Will they be considered meat? So for example, would somebody be able to grow cow cells, which are again, they're taken from a live cow? Would they be able to eat those with dairy, for example? Could you make a kosher cheeseburger to be eaten? Also, would be able to be would we be able to grow a,
But if you're strictly kosher, I don't.
would
see
you
why
be able
couldn't
to
eat it.
grow, would you be able to grow a, would you be able to grow a pig? Does it really be a pig?
From the pig's out,
But you're not killing a pig.
doesn't matter.
You're not eating a
It
pig per
doesn't
se.
have-
Here's the
That's what
story,
we're next
folks.
week.
November 21st. No kill product cultivated from animal cells has only small regulatory hurdles left before it can be sold in restaurants. Chicken nuggets from a lab-grown meat in Singapore, the only country where lab-grown meat can currently be sold. I'm not in a hurry to have a journey to Singapore to eat it, but I am
Me
curious about whether it will, what it'll taste like. Look, I don't know whether I'll eat it. I don't know whether we'll eat it, but there definitely are already rabbinic discussions about whether this, we'll talk about it next week, but here again, you thought I was making this up. This is real. Just happened.
More than what I read it before.
Will we eat these one day? Will this be on the tables for people? I don't
I'll
know.
give it about 5 years.
Do we want to eat those? Is that something that people want to eat? I don't know. For people who are not vegetarian, this isn't an issue for you. You go out and have a chicken nugget. But if you have not had a real chicken nugget, if you've not had an
Well,
animal,
if you're kosher, you couldn't eat chicken nugget.
why?
If you're a kosher, if you strictly are kosher.
Because they don't have kosher chicken nuggets? No, but if you have a kosher chicken, you can make nuggets
Yeah.
out of it.
I guess what you're saying.
Yeah, there's no part of the chicken that's not, it's no part of the chicken that's not from the nugget. Yeah, what part of the, what part of the chicken does the nugget come from? I want to know. But yes, there's no part of a chicken that's not kosher. Unlike cows, which have there's unkosher cuts. We've talked about it before, but we'll
Right.
talk more about the meat the next week. I will tell you, I had this discussion with somebody today who's also just recently become, he's pescatarian, but he recently was talking to me about it, and we're talking about how many options there are for people who don't eat meat now, how many fake meat substitutes. And as I said many times, I'm the worst vegetarian in the world. I am pretty sure I'm the worst vegetarian in the world because I love meat. Always loved meat. And I had, no one thought I'd be able to be a vegetarian for a day, let alone 28 years. But people always, were saying, "Nah, he can't stay a vegetarian," but because I love meat and potatoes, and I still do. But because I don't like vegetables. I'm honest about it. I don't like vegetables. I wish I did. I don't like them. I like carrots and lettuce. That's about it. Tomatoes, but I guess they're a fruit anyways. But I don't like vegetables for the most part. But I've gotten better over time, but I'm still a very bad vegetarian from that standpoint. And I will tell you that I'm very lucky that I have lived to see very good vegan, vegetarian, whatever versions of hamburgers. I've been blessed to be able to have that. I eat them too much. They're still not very healthy for you, but I do love them. And my wife made a delicious Beyond Steak pie yesterday that I had a little bit of tonight that had fake steak and potatoes in a pie, which is a very English thing to do because they eat lots of pies there, meat pies. Yeah. And she made me a delicious meat pie with there were vegetables in there. I mean, granted, there were potatoes and peas and carrots and things that I like anyways, but it was delicious. And it was a very meat type meal. And so they're even making steak. So who knows? Maybe in the future, all of us will be eating animals that were cultivated in a lab. But I will tell you this: if they come out healthy, and if healthy meat comes out of it, and it doesn't require slaughtering and the mass waste that animals create, because they do create a tremendous waste. They also create a tremendous toxicity in the ability to spread disease. Avian flu and those kinds of things that perhaps, there might be an answer out there for us to eat, flesh in a healthy way. So anyways, we just read about all the sacrifices that the priests made, and now we're going to read about what you and I can eat. So we will see you next week online. Everyone stay well. Happy New Year. It's good to see Joyce back feeling good. You look great, Joyce.
Thank you so much.
Glad you're feeling healthy. You sound great. And you made it all the way through to the end. So
Yes, I did.
Good night, everybody.
And I'm
Stay
not
healthy.
exhausted.
Good night.
Love you
See you
all.
soon.
Thank you,
Bye.
Rabbi.
Happy New
everybody.
Year.
Happy
Happy
New
New
Year.
Year.
Bye-bye.